Greetings and welcome to Georgian Crossroads. This is Byrne Power coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia on a fine early spring day where the leaves are all coming out on the trees. There's blossoms on some of them and I'm getting a little bit of a hay fever kind of thing. Not much, just I can tell if I leave the window open at night, I'll be feeling it. But Georgia, yeah, you might want to visit here someday. And if you do, well, one of the problems you're going to have immediately is communicating. And in communication, it's not that hard here. Georgians are a pretty friendly people. And what you'll often read in books is that most of the people, say under 30, 35, speak some English. Most of the people over 40 or so speak Russian. So you shouldn't have a problem. But in fact, it's not anywhere near that simple. You meet many people who can speak no other language than Georgian. This tends to be a class issue. If you are living in a smaller village, chances are your English is not going to be very good, even if you're a younger person, because you just don't have any chance to really talk with anyone. Whereas in Tbilisi, you can find people who will help you. Now, if you then go online and try to find get some Georgian lessons, well, that's a good thing to do, but oh my, Georgia is a difficult language, especially if you're coming from almost any other language system on earth, because it's got several problems attached to it. One, it isn't connected to any other language system outside of a couple of other languages here in Georgia, for instance, Swan and Megrelian. So unless you're familiar with those, and even those aren't exactly the same, most of the words are going to be tricky for you to hear even. When I first came here, it was like somebody had a radio on in the car and they were switching the dial to get to the next station, and all I heard was because there's a lot of pops and clicks in the language and sounds.
არა მარტო, იმიტომ რომ მიკროფონის გარდა კიდევ ძალიან დიდი აუდიტორია სტუდენტები მყავს სხვადასხვა უნივერსიტეტებში, სადაც სხვა გზა არ არის, ესე ვთქვათ, ხმით პირველ რიგში ხარ რომ შედის ადამიანი, ხო? ზოგიერთი ხან ისე შემოხედავს, ხან ეს ვინ არის, ან ზოგიერთი რაღაცას კარგ სიტყვის არ ვიცი, მაგრამ ფაქტი ის არის, რომ შენ პირველივე ბგერით.
So I didn't actually, I familiarized myself with it a bit, but no amount of familiarization outside the country is going to prepare you for the sound of the language. Secondly, no amount of familiarization is going to be able to help you read the alphabet. And I'm not going to deal with the problems of reading the alphabet right now. I will say this, in Tbilisi, you can often find, for instance, street signs with both Kartuli Georgian script and with Latin script. So that's not so much of a problem, although there are some places where you'll still see Cyrillic script. And then if you're coming from Western Europe or America or the Anglosphere or Africa or India or Vietnam or anywhere else, then that's going to be a problem because you probably don't read Cyrillic either. But you don't see as much of that, although it is a problem for me when I go to buy shampoo. I've been here over 4 years now, and last year, 2 weeks ago, I went looking for shampoo, and I'm sitting there, and it's all Cyrillic script. and I can't, you can read the name maybe, but I can't read what it is. Is this good for dry hair, oily hair? Does this smooth out your hair? Does it make it super loose and shaky? Who knows? So fortunately there are body shops here. So you can get some of those in English, but they're kind of on the more expensive side. And sometimes I do use those, the tea tree oil, but I don't use I don't want to use that all the time. I want to sometimes mix it up with just cheaper especially conditioners. I don't really care too much about those. So, yeah. But anyway, back to Georgian. I've met more than one Georgian who says, Georgian isn't that hard. And it's like a fish speaking to someone on land saying, you should come on in. The water isn't that difficult to live underwater. The language is hard. It's one of the harder languages on earth because it's not connected to everything and because of the alphabet and because of the grammar. So one of the things, I think there's only one piece of, one verb I'm going to give you today, and even then just one conjugation of it, because it is difficult and you're not going to be able to apply it right away. So even if you learn, for instance, let's say you start a course of learning Georgian and you get to Georgia. Well, what are you going to do when you actually get to Georgia okay, so you've learned how to conjugate to be and you can say these things. So what? You're not going to be able to do anything. And the Georgians are friendly. They will help you if they see you're struggling to try to buy something. But if you're, I have to confess, my fellow Americans are terrible at languages, as am I. And we're terrible precisely because everywhere you go in the world, you can find English speakers. And you can find a fair amount of English speakers here. That being said, once you enter certain situations, you will be lost. And those situations will especially include going shopping, asking for things, pointing at things and knowing what to say. Also, I think no matter who you are, you need to be polite when you enter a country. And so you ought to get over saying, for instance, thank you in English first thing. If you're here for years still saying thank you in English, that starts to become a bit of a problem. You need to learn some Georgian. Now, I've been here over 4 years, and I have to confess, it's difficult. Part of it is I'm older. It's difficult to learn. It is difficult to learn languages when you are older. So that's one thing. It's easier to be distracted when you're older and not be able to buckle down. Appreciate the time in your late teens and early 20s when your mind can focus better, because when you get older, it's a little more difficult. But here's the deal. You need some survival Georgian, and that's what I'm going to teach you today. These are just, what is it? Is it even 30 words? I don't think so. That you need to learn before you get here or as soon as you get here to help you navigate day-to-day politeness and transactions. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm sure if you speak Georgian, you will forgive me for making mistakes, but these are the things I've learned in the last 4 years. And it's just simple 1 or 2 word phrases that will help you navigate. Because like I say, even if you start learning the language and you're not here, until you get here, you won't know anything. And for instance, learning to conjugate a few verbs and a few words isn't going to help you in a transaction in a grocery store. Unless you specifically work on those things. And most people aren't disciplined enough to get far enough into the language to do that. But I have found shortcuts that will help you. So let us learn survival Georgian. By the way, before we get into it, subscribe to the channel if you find this interesting. Hit like to help the algorithm share this thing. You can even, I pass on if you think I'm doing a good job, there is a link below where you can send me a few lari, or dollars, or shekels, or euro, even euro, yeah. But I think it's all through dollars. So you can do that, and that would be a nice thing to do. All right, so let's go. So what is the first word you should learn in Kartuli, Georgian? The first word I think you should learn in any language is not hello. That should be immediately afterwards. But the word is thank you or thanks. Why? because this is what you're going to be saying more than anything else. You're going to be saying it to the people on the plane when you're getting off. You're going to be saying it to people who are helping you, even if they're speaking English. You want to thank them to show them that you recognize you're in another country. I mean, I think so many people understand the word thank you because of movies and television. But still, to show that you respect their culture, you should say their word for thank you. And the Georgian word for thank you, as I've said before, is madloba. Madloba. Now, there is another word that sometimes shows up in guidebooks and language books, and it's gemadlobt. And I'm not going to teach you that because every Georgian I know says madloba is perfectly fine, and that GM gemadlobt is difficult for people, especially who aren't Georgians. So just madloba. It's very simple. The next word is hello, which of course I've also used before on this channel, and that is Gaumarjoba. Gaumarjoba. There's a slight rolling of the R, but if you just say Gaumarjoba, you're fine. But get the rhythm right. It's not Gaumarjoba or something like that. It's all Gaumarjoba, one straight line. Now, the next word I learned, because I heard it everywhere. If I was going to say, is there one word that you hear all the time? It's interesting when you're listening around, you're listening and you hear one sound all the time. And that word is ara, no. which makes you think that Georgians are always saying no to each other. And in a way they are. But sometimes they're saying no, like no, no, no. Ara, ara, ara. And I've learned to say it correctly. That is to say, if someone says, do you need a bag, a bargi, packet for your groceries? They'll say that to you. I will simply go ara, 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 or ara, ara. You usually never say it by itself. But sometimes you'll hear someone go, ara, very loud. But you hear it all the time. But sometimes it has a good meaning. It's like, do you need my help? And they'll say, ara, ara, ara. They don't, that's fine. Sometimes it just means, no, that's okay. Everything is working out. So the word ara, no, very important. Now, yes is more complicated. There are 3 words for it, and it took me a while to figure out when to use them. I suppose you could use all of them at any time. That's not really true. But the first one is ki, or ki. Think of, it's almost, if you were saying gi, you're closer than it's saying just ki. So there's 2 K sounds. So you just hit it. It's like this second K sound in cake. Cake. So it's ki, ki, ki. And you often hear people will use this when they're feeling a bit more excited. They go like ki, ki, ki. The next one is ho. And this is often used, you hear people go, ho, ho. It's used more like, I notice it's more for commiseration. If someone says, you can tell they're having a phone call, and they go, ho, ho, ho. Or they'll be talking to someone and someone says, oh, life's difficult. And they go, ho, ho. You wouldn't want to say, ki, 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 life is difficult. You'd want to go, ho. And the last one is diach. And diach is one you won't use, so you don't really have to think too much about it, but it's in formal situations. So if you were giving a paper in school and you wanted to say, yes, teacher, you'd go like diach. And if you were in a job and you wanted to say something to the manager, you'd go diach. It's for a formal, it's like saying yes in English as opposed to yeah or sure or some other sign of affirmation. Next, rogorhar. And what that means is, how are you doing today? How are you? And the answer, if you're doing well, should be kagad, kagad, kargad, kagad, which means, I'm doing well. Now, it can also be used, and you hear this more often, it's about the same, as a farewell. People will go, bye, and someone will go, kagad, which means it's actually a contraction from a longer phrase, kagad ik avi. Now, obviously the ik Avi is not going to be on your menu right away. That it's got the weird sound in it, and I have trouble with that one. And I keep practicing it. But if you just say kagad, everyone knows what you're saying. So just remember the word kagad. So you're in a store, you want to point something out. You would point to it, and there are two words. One is is, and that means it or this. So you're standing at a fruit stand, or you're trying to buy some meat, and they're asking you how much. You can figure out that they're asking you, and you'll point to something and you go is, which means it or this. Or if you want to mix it up, you can go s and point to something else. So is da is and. Oh, I got to remember that word. Da is and. Is da s. S is that. One way to remember it is that is sounds like this or it, and s doesn't. So s is more for that. So is da s, this and that. Is an s. An is or. So we won't get that far into it though. So those are two important words. Let's say you're in a taxi and you want the taxi to stop somewhere, but they're going to, you suspect they're going to go further. So you're going to go ak. You're going to say ak. And what does ak mean? Ak means here. So, and when you look up the phrase over here, which is what we would say in America, over here, please, then it would be the same, ak. Or you could say eek. You're going to say eek. Eek means there. Now, I did just mention, what if you want to say please? Well, please is a weird one. It doesn't work exactly as it is in English. You wouldn't go up to someone and say, could I please do this? Now, there is a phrase, tu shedslaba, and that could work. But let's use it let's think about you're in a bus or a metro, or you're trying to get through somewhere and there's someone in the way. The best word to use is ukatsravad. Ukatsravad. And that means basically, excuse me, I've got to get through, something like that. If you really bump into someone, causing some sort of, more than just a simple... Now, Georgians will bump into you all the time, and nobody's going to apologize for that. But if you really do something like trip somebody, or really cause something that might be considered a little bit offensive, then you would go bodishi, which means I am sorry for what I did. Now, the reason I said that instead of just sorry is because sometimes in English, we will use the word sorry for something that's not our fault. So, it was raining today. Sorry, but you wouldn't say that in Georgia because you're not responsible for the rain. So bodishi means it's particularly when it's your fault. If you're in a situation where you walk into a store or you're trying to get something done, and you want to know if someone can help you. Now, you could just say, do you speak English? Which is fine. I often just say, Englishuri, which is the word for English, just to be a little more polite. They will know you're probably. But interestingly enough, when Georgians hear you speak, many of them can't tell what country you are when you speak English, because their ears aren't trained that much to hear the differences between, say, when a German speaks English or a French person speaks English and an actual American speaks English. And I get people all the time who can't recognize that I'm American from my speech, especially, people who don't know English that well. So let's think about a few numbers. Now, normally, when you think about numbers, you think about 1 through 10. I am not going to give you 1 through 10, and there's a reason for it. First of all, when you're buying things or needing to use numbers, you don't need them all. I'll tell them to you. It's erti, ori, sami, Otki, chuti, see, I stopped myself because the rhythm is strange. It really was difficult for me to learn the numbers because of the rhythm. So, erti, ori, sami, otki, chuti, eksi, shridi, rava, skra, ati. Ati always feels like I'm coming home. So that's 1 through 10. But the truth is, most of those you don't need. And there's some really difficult ones like otki and eksi. If you look at how eksi is spelled, and I'm probably not even saying it right there, that's the hardest one to learn. So erti is 1, ori is 2, sami is 3. Now, how often do you need to use 4? That's the difficult one. Not that often, especially if you're just going to be in Georgia for a while. You don't need to learn that because otki is difficult for people who aren't Georgian to say. Chuti, you kind of have to say that. That's 5. You need 5. But then 6, 7, 8, 9, you don't really need those that much. That is to say, if you're pointing at something, at a certain point, you can just, keep motioning to add more. And the reason I don't want to teach them to you right now is because in our survival Georgian, you need what you learn to survive. Those 5 other letters from 1 to 10 are difficult to do. So, since they're not needed as much, you need 1, 2, 3 when you're pointing at things, but 4 less so. If you're going to get 4, you'll probably get 5. Then, 10, ati, that's important. And 20 is otsi. Now, when you get higher than that, we have a base 20 system. So I'm not going to go into all of that right now. But the next important one is asi, 100. Because then this is easy to learn. If you want, you're not going to be buying it in pounds or ounces unless you're in America. You're going to be using grams and kilograms, and you're going to be using meters. So, grami, so asi grami, 100 grams is something you will need. Asi grami is something you will need. Orasi grami is 200 grams. You're more likely to get that amount. Samasi grami. Now, beyond that, I'm not going to go into it, but you can see orasi is ori asi, that's 200 grams. Learn asi and orasi and samasi. So that asi is 100, orasi is 200, 300. Because when you're pointing, I've found asi, 100 grams, is in many cases not enough. It's not enough of something to eat. And then there's kilograms and meters, and meters are metri, kilogrammi, metri, kilometri. So that will be helpful. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Saying goodbye. Nakwamdis. Now, if you look up every book, whether it's the Lonely Planet book or the instruction books on how to speak Georgian, will tell you that the first letter na, now the K and H are one letter, that's ch, and then the next one they will tell you it's a v sound, and that's because it's not. It's something in between v and wa. So it seems like when there's a harder sound, it turns into a more of a wa sound. So it's nakwamdis, rather than when I first got here, I said nakvamdis, and I was immediately corrected. And I was but all the books say, and I've heard a few Georgians say something closer to that, obviously. But it's more like when I say nakwamdis, everyone's happy. So that means goodbye. And so just learn that nach, that KH is a ch sound, nachwamdis, And just to be a little classy, you can say, if you think you're going to see these people again, say Droebit. Droebit, which literally means temporarily. But what it actually means is we'll be out of our sight for a little while and we will meet again. So there you are, a few tips just to help you on the streets of Georgia to be polite, to do a little bit of counting, not much, but enough to do transactions in a store. And a few words to just, I don't know, to show that you are respectful of the Georgians. And so, Droebit, we will meet again.